Here's the before shot of the table that I'm going to be working on in this video. It had multiple spots of pretty considerable damage, and half of the side was completely covered in gouges like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab my Kwikwood epoxy wood filler. Comes like this in 2 parts, and you get to do that satisfying little chop, and then pick it up, and you have to kind of knead it and squish it and mix the 2 parts together with your fingers. At first it looks like this, and you can clearly see a difference in the 2 parts, but after about a minute or 2 of just kind of kneading it with your hands until it's completely mixed and is a much more uniform color like this. So once that's done, I remove my glove and I just start pressing it into the crevices and the gouges on the table. I do this without using a glove because this kind of wood filler is really sticky, and I really haven't found any better way of filling in the gouges than just with my finger. A glove makes it much worse because it just sticks to the glove. So I try to just work as quickly as I can, pressing it into the crevices and gouges, and then wash my hands immediately. Also, this stuff dries incredibly fast, so you really don't have a lot of time to work with it, so you want to work as quickly as possible. And it's better to have a little bit too much than not enough in the hole that you're filling. Once that dries completely, I'm going to use my orbital sander to remove any of the excess parts of the wood filler. I'm actually doing what I would never recommend and tipping my sander slightly to the side so that I'm really basically only sanding the wood filler and as little of the table as possible. It works on this table because it has an extremely thick top coat from before, and so it's taking a lot of sanding without going down to raw wood really easily. But on a normal table, you might not be able to do that. It really just kind of depends on the wood and the finish. If you can't use a sander, you'll have to sand by hand. Now that all the damage is fixed and all those gouges and holes are filled in, I get to do the fun part, which is trying to blend that bright wood filler into the same color as the table, which is kind of like a barnyard brownish gray. So I actually tried a lot of different things and nothing was really working until I started using an antique glaze, and that worked really well. I just started by doing 1 coat at a time, just a nice thin layer right on the wood filler for the sides, just because there was so much damage, and I basically sanded like half of that, the bottom half of the table. I just applied the glaze as you normally would with a cloth, and then wiped back the excess. So once the glaze dried, I applied a thin layer of the Satin Topcoat, which is the top coat that I'm going to be using at the end of the project, over those damaged spots and let that dry. Then I lightly sanded the entire table, just a very light sanding, which I did not show. I apologize for that. And I took my can of glaze and went over the entire tabletop with a very thin layer of the glaze. So I'm following the wood grain carefully because the wood grain on this table goes in several different directions. So I'm just going over the entire table, and for this glaze, I'm just using an old cloth, an old t-shirt rag, and dipping it in the glaze and then kind of wiping over the entire table. And then if there's any excess or any spots that I don't really like, I go back over it and wipe off the extra until I'm finished with the entire table. And I am going over the damaged spots as well, just so that everything is nice and uniform. If anything looks too dark, since the damaged spots are covered with the satin polyurethane, I can just wipe that away really easily. It wipes right off. So in case if a spot is getting like a little bit too dark or, not blending in quite the way you want to, all you have to do is wipe it back. So here's how it looks after that last coat of the glaze over the entire table. Luckily for me, this was already a pretty distressed looking table, so those extra spots blended in really well. And you can kind of tell where the spots are, especially in this video, but in person, they're very unnoticeable. And here's just another shot of the table in a little bit lower light, and as you can see, it's blending very well. Once I had blended everything and got it to the way that I wanted it to look, I was ready for the last step, which is the top coat. So I'm using a polyurethane in a satin finish, and I'm using this foam brush and just wiping it on. I'm doing the same thing that I did with the glaze, and I'm following the wood grain. It just always looks better that way, pretty much on whatever type of furniture you're doing it on. So for this piece, it was a little bit tricky because that X in the middle and then the planks, the curved planks around the edge were going in a different direction than the triangles in the middle. So I just had to do the triangles first, and then I would go back over the X part with my brush and make sure that everything was all smooth and going in the right direction at that point. When I'm working with a lighter colored wood like this one, I love using the water-based polyurethane, and I'm just using the Varathane brand, which you can find at Home Depot. I find that it makes a really nice satin sheen, and it doesn't alter the color of the wood at all. In fact, it just kind of highlights it and then gives you that nice smooth satin finish that's really modern and classy. And here's the finished look. Let me know how you think it turned out. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave those in the comments, and check the description for all the products that I used for this restoration. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next clip.